John.
Guys, how's it going? I know, Ronald, you could be in a better place, so I appreciate you soldiering through this pod and not feeling so hot, but
I love you guys. It's been an emotional 2 days.
I bet. Anytime illness is involved,
house.
Anytime illness plus house, and kid, wife, partner, whatever. This is like exponentially worse when more than one person is experiencing anything because you're just.
Here's the problem.
It's horrible.
When I get sick, I'm miserable. When my daughter gets sick, she's doing a salsa dance in the middle of the carpet. Like she is like, it's very
like draining out snot and like coughing, but still managing to keep that form the whole way through. Yeah,
fucking salsa going. It's crazy.
The kids are pretty resilient.
Yeah, it's good to see you guys.
Well, kids don't know to act sick.
Yeah, for sure.
They don't know that part of being sick is acting sick. And sometimes it's funny when you have a kid, when your kids get a little older, both of you will experience this where the kid wants to duck out of school or whatever, and they're sick, and you're sort of like, okay, well, if you stay home, you have to act sick.
Yeah.
Like, don't be like jumping around doing somersaults just because you're a kid.
Yeah.
And it's like, part of that is like, oh, you were faking being sick a little bit, but part of that is just kids don't perceive it the same way. They're sort of like, but if I start to feel sick, if I agree I'm sick, then I go into a whole different setting. I shut down. I grab a blanket.
You go a low battery setting.
Yeah.
Your bar turns yellow. You just like.
I have one bell that means soup, and I don't use that bell often, but I ring the soup bell.
Soup. So simple, so soothing. All right, well, let's get going here so we don't keep Ronald too long. I don't want him getting winded or falling asleep on us. So should be a brief episode today. We got Ronald's pick actually for required viewing coming up first, which was The Tunnel. Was it 2011? Was that the right year?
2011.
So we'll get to that first, and then I think we're going to talk a little bit about the Loki season 2. Maybe you two can briefly discuss the Marvels. You both were able to see that. And then what else were we talking about?
I should at least talk about it because I did go and sit through
the Games of Hunger.
Yes, the Games of Hunger. Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, I believe. So yes,
I'll take your word for it. But yeah, you can talk about that, and then anything else.
That sounds like a thing, right?
Yeah, that sounds legitimate. I'd buy that for $1. So yeah, let's go. Required viewing. Ronald, remind us about The Tunnel.
Yeah, so my 2011 pick. My pick is the 2011 Australian found footage monster horror film directed by Carlos Ledesma. The movie The Tunnel, which was filmed for $100,000, and you wouldn't be able to tell me that.
It was like crowdfunded. I was reading it was a crowdfunded for $135,000.
Insane, because I watch movies that cost $40 million. And this movie looks better than that.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, it's a scrappy little found footage movie. I think the devil's in the details, and I think what makes this thing a little more snappy is the pacing once it kicks in, and then the sound design. It's one of the things that I noticed, because when one of those sounds goes off in the movie, it shook my basement, which I don't have a lot of movies that do. I got to be honest with you. So it was really cool to find that in such an obscure 100K movie. So what did you guys think of 2011's The Tunnel?
I thought it was really good. I mean, I quite liked it. I mean, especially reading more about it after the fact. I mean, I feel like it's kind of that mix of, it's got this found footage interview mashup of post events, and it's got this lore kind of built into what takes these journalists, or this journalist and her crew, down into the tunnels to do some investigation. But I mean, putting them in place, I think what works a lot for me is like it really kind of, specifically, she reminded me a lot of like the Blair Witch Project. What is it? What's her name in the movie? Sarah? Heather. Like just that like genuine like fear, like when they're in those moments. I kind of bought that for the most part, for all of them, but especially her. And I feel like it's a lot of these found footage movies. I don't know that I always buy into it, especially I think it can't be understated. Like, it's crazy that this movie was $135,000, like Ronald said. Like, I mean, it does look, it doesn't look like a movie that has a massive budget, but I do feel like it's a movie you could tell like they were very creative and made that go a long way, and like kind of were smart about the locations and like what they had to show and not show, and creative ways of using like night vision and things like that, just to kind of like strip away some of the production design and scope that might make that budget a lot higher. But I think when you strip those things away, if you can kind of be lean and kind of creative with, especially, people are kind of spent on, or a lot of people are spent on like found footage type stuff, even though this movie, is 12 years old. I think it's kind of interesting. But yeah, overall, like I kind of like the idea of what it was and the history of this positive intent that the county council or like the town had to do something, and then it just stopped cold. And like why are people gone missing, and that all kind of adds up to just intrigue to me. And I thought for the most part I was entertained for the majority of the movie. And one of the things I was reading about it beyond the way it was crowdfunded that was really interesting, and I think speaks to probably how it has the cult following that it has, even like when you've mentioned it, I know I've heard about this title a bunch, is that it was the first Australian production and one of the at the forefront in general, but the first Australian film that was legally distributed through BitTorrent. And which is like, when that went out, there was over 10 million users on BitTorrent. And this was like I said, the first Australian film that was done like this legally. So it's a partnership between the filmmakers, the production company, BitTorrent, and there was one other, I forget what the other partner was. It was like through an app in BitTorrent that was distributing it. But what a creative thing, like a small budget movie like this that already kind of had its run in its domestic market, had some sort of release here, DVD, digital, it went through the motions. And it's like, at the time, especially if you're thinking that time of, 2011, still kind of pretty high on BitTorrent, people still using that stuff pretty heavily, to say, oh, here's the legally available torrent, and it's like a horror movie, that's bait right there. Like that just sounds like the people that are using that technology would be like, sure. And I mean, I don't know what the statistics are. I've tried to find some of that stuff, but I couldn't really track anything like official down, in terms of like how many times it was downloaded or like if it had any details on that. But I mean, I for sure am convinced that that's kind of what probably gave a movie like this small legs that kind of allow it to permeate conversations about unseen horror movies, or like you need to check this one out, or which is obviously the reason it found its way onto our podcast. So, but yeah, in general, I thought it was really cool and I enjoyed it. John, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I liked it for a lot of the reasons you mentioned, both of you. I think the use of the locations was key. I think that for a found footage thing, that's going to be one of your main things, is like how do you, I mean, the big things with found footage is like, what's the excuse for somebody filming it? Why do they keep filming it? How do you handle the handoff through the movie of like, if you've got different cameras, and that became a piece of the narrative. I think that was pretty well handled. And yeah, I think just the premise of, I mean, I've read about these types of things and I've pondered them, but just the idea of like a secret underground lake is a pretty, I mean, your imagination kind of goes wild with what could be there. I mean, it's a natural wonder maybe, but it's also something that's very interesting from a, maybe a biological standpoint. What could be down there that it hasn't seen the light in whatever amount of time? And again, that too can be scientific as well as fanciful. So I just think that setting was really interesting. I do think you mentioned the Blair Witch. I feel like the Blair Witch comparison almost hurts because I feel like they so closely kind of copied the Blair Witch, like right down to the arc of the female character being kind of the one who's pushing this forward. And then she kind of has this moment of sorrow and regret late in the movie. I thought that in that sense, it was like, we've seen the Blair Witch and they've seen the Blair Witch. So it was a nice little moment. We could all agree we've seen the Blair Witch. But I also think, and this is just a problem, I think sometimes horror movies run the risk of doing this if they're not saving everything for the final punch, is they kind of peak early. And I think like the opening scene with the audio of the distress call to like the, public services or whatever, was scary. And when we finally were in that moment where we were seeing the closed circuit television cameras, and I was like, oh, we're gonna see what happened in that opening scene. But nothing really happens. Like by that time, the tensions bled out of the movie to some extent. Whereas I think the real peak of the film was maybe a few minutes before, when things heated up down in the tunnel. So I feel like that was like a kind of, oh, okay. And then it goes on for like 5 minutes, this epilogue about like where everybody ended up, which again, I think was well done from a documentary pastiche. Like this is one of the rare found footage movies that really tries to look like a fake documentary, like the talking heads shots and stuff. So I appreciated some of that, even down to the way the actors are acting, like particularly the guy, what was his name? The character,
Peter?
No, Peter was the
Steve?
one. Yeah, Steve. The actor in his talking head segments, that actor was doing a great job of sort of gently, almost doing a satire of the way people act in talking heads interviews when they're the one who lived through it or whatever. So I thought that formal aspect of the movie was interesting, but I think that like giving us what really happened to these fictional characters at the end was a little bit more deflating. It's like if I felt a little deflated by the end, that very ending was more air going out of the balloon, whereas maybe 10 minutes before that I was on the edge of my seat because of some of the stuff you're talking about. With honestly, there's like some close corridor running around, and I mean it's a little chaotic, and I think all found footage movies have a certain excuse to be chaotic and sort of like quote unquote badly shot, but this movie felt like one where like the idea that the person trying to shoot this is actually trying to shoot something. I don't know. I just bought into the character of the cameraman and the sound guy, and the woman on camera being sort of the host of the documentary. I thought that they did a good job of selling that, even though that is almost that's exactly Blair Witch, right? I mean, that's the same basic setup,
basically.
But no, I thought it was I mean, it made me think about As Above, So Below, which is actually a movie that came out 3 years after this. So in that case, it was kind of ahead of that one. So behind Blair Witch and ahead of As Above, So Below. But yeah, I was very, very engaged by this. When it was really cooking, I thought it was as you guys mentioned, a really solid found footage movie. And I don't know how to guess whether a found footage movie costs money or not, because the point is to look like you don't cost money. But I do think that the judicious use of what I assume were computer generated effects in this, the way they were able to hide them in the shadows and stuff, I thought that was, there was some clever stretching of a budget to create something that was maybe not totally new, but it was like a new eerie version of something we've seen before, somewhere between Blair Witch and The Descent and that kind of story.
Based on Steve's remake rule, technically, you can't give this a smudge on Blair Witch because it's 10 years past it. I'm just saying, this is Steve's rule. I don't make the rules. Once you get past 10 years, you could do whatever you want, even if they call it the Tunnel Witch Project. It is. Technically,
I want to go there with you, Ron.
But it's the Blair Witch Tunnel, actually.
Yeah, I want to agree with that premise, but I think that if it had been called that, we probably wouldn't have talked about it for this podcast. You know what I mean? It would sound like,
for sure,
like what's a porn parody that's not porn?
You're right.
Just a parody, I guess.
Project. Yeah. Now, who's next? Whose pick is next?
It's Steve.
So I wanted to ask you guys. So are we keeping the spooky stuff going, or are we pivoting?
We don't have to, but I'd like to.
I know that mine. I have several picks that could be considered spooky. That could be my next picks. So I'm ready to go whichever way you want to go, Steve.
Okay, got it.
I'm here for you. We're here for you.
You're here for me. You're both here for me.
The world is listening. The world is here for you.
Yeah, for sure.
So I'm looking through my list I've kind of maintained, and I think the one I'm trying to think what people could probably access. I'd have to look this up to be sure.
Speaking of the world watching, why are you thinking? Thank you so much for the 10 or I think it's 15 or 20 extra subscribers that we've gotten in the past like month or so. Yeah.
John, in the past 5 years.
no, we're pretty good. We're doing pretty well. The pacing is okay.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, thank you. Seriously, thank you guys. Thank you for watching. Now, Steve, for your pick.
So I think there's this one that I've been wanting to check out. I never got it. It's only 5 years old, so it looks like it's available. It's actually available. We're big supporters of Plex. It's one of the movies and TV free streaming on Plex too. Let's give a plug for Plex, but it's also on Tubi. And those are probably your best bets. But this is a movie from 2018. It's a short movie. It's only 83 minutes. It's called "I'll Take Your Dead." Have either of you seen this movie?
No.
Okay, cool. Perfect. This is great. So I'll kind of just try to read you this brief thing. A farmer makes a living disposing of bodies. One day, 3 bodies are delivered, except the young woman is still alive. If set free, the gang will come after him and his daughter. So
no,
it's a horror thriller. I just like the idea of like, this is a person who makes dead bodies disappear as a career. And there's a little bit of a snag or a wrinkle in what he is tasked with doing. I don't really know much of it, but beyond that, like
one of the few jobs where you say, "Oh shit, they're alive."
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Oh damn. Okay. But yeah, it's a little more thriller than horror. But I mean, the trailer definitely tinkers on that. But I forget one of the filmmakers that I love. I don't know if it was Mike Flanagan or it was somebody that is really well. Flanagan's not really on Twitter all that much anymore, but on Twitter, one of the horror filmmakers, or maybe it wasn't a horror filmmaker, just someone I remember when this came out was like kind of really championing this movie. I don't know if he had anything to do with it or if it was like a friend or somebody that made it, but it kept popping up on my timeline to the point that I remember adding it to my list and kind of going through what I have here for horror, mainly because I wanted to plug Plex, honestly, because obviously Ronald and I live and die by Plex, and John, you use it, and Plex is a great free app, and anything that I can do as our required viewing that would drive somebody to download and try Plex out is awesome, because they have channels on there that have tons of free shows, movies, originals, and this one's on there. So it's called "I'll Take Your Dead" 2018. Again, free on Plex, free on Tubi. Take your pick, and perfectly timed to Thanksgiving. No, I'm kidding. The week after Thanksgiving.
Speaking of Tubi, that was one thing I wanted to mention about watching The Tunnel too. It was a little bit odd having like ads, like these super upbeat, cheerful ads that would break into the tension of that movie.
I remember when I was watching one of the ones you had picked, John. What was the one with it was like a 70s or maybe even older than that. It was like it had Sean Connery in it, I think was the one. Yeah, I think that was on Tubi, and I remember it kept coming in with the commercials, and it was the kid from Stranger Things, Will, and it was like the Amazon commercials, like the Amazon wish list for his college dorm room.
Yes, I saw the same.
I saw like 12 of them. Yeah, I feel like watching this like gritty, dark, bleak Sean Connery, police thriller killer thing, and every like 3 or 4 minutes or 5 minutes, it'd be like, "Follow me, guys, as I put together my Amazon wish list."
Well, right, it's so at odds with the tone of the thing, but it also is like hard to believe that Amazon would not be like, "You don't have to put our ad in the middle of that movie,
right?" Or you don't have to bother
putting this on that one.
Or maybe it was on, maybe it wasn't Tubi, maybe it was on Freevee. It was one of the ones that has ads. Amazon on Freevee would make more sense, but yeah, that one stood out to me. It was just like such a horrible match.
Well, they need to make special gritty, depressing ads to put in those films. You know what I mean? Like just so that the tone stays the same.
Absolutely.
But all right, no, I'll Take Your Dead. Can't wait.
Cool.
All right, guys. So let's jump our go-to always Marvel. Let's talk a little bit about
Let's
Loki
time slip into
time slip.
The era when Marvel mattered. Guess what? It matters again. Marvel's back. I think it's funny. I think it's funny. Marvel's dead. Marvel's back. Everybody wants it to be dead. Everybody wants it to be back. It's not dead. It's not back. It's just chugging along.
It just is.
Yeah. But Loki season 2, and particularly I think the way it wrapped up was one of those peak Marvel things for me, honestly.
Absolutely.
And it's like, it's nice to know they can have in the same week, if within a few days of each other, a peak Marvel thing like the end of Loki season 2, and a fun, we might call it middle of the pack style Marvel movie, but the Marvels, which I saw in theaters this weekend, definitely has like a handful of those little moments that people do find special about these movies, even if the movie around it is another one that is sort of, you know, I mean, I don't think the box office even really reflects the quality of the movie. There's something else going on with the general interest level in Marvel that doesn't have that much to do with what this movie is. Maybe they couldn't market it that well, but I think within the span of a few days, I started to feel that little Marvel feeling of, yeah, they got, I mean, they've got a 50-50 shot maybe at this point of when they put something out that it's going to have that kind of impact. I think the thing that feels different, and I've been wanting to ask you guys about this ever since the Echo trailer came out, is that, don't you think the thing that seems different, the difference is not that the quality is up and down, or that it's not all amazingly iconic classic, you know, one classic film after another. It's that they seem nervous right now. Like, when that Echo trailer came out, it seemed like it was dropped at a time and made in such a way to sort of like convince people, maybe, I don't know, check this out. And then like within this week, we've gotten they dropped the What If announcement about how that's going to be coming out. So Echo's going to be dropping all the episodes at once, I believe. What If's going to be coming out an episode a day over a week in the December, I think. Or soon after. Anyway, I'm just saying they're trying different release strategies. They're hitting us with a bunch of little different things. It's not so much that it doesn't look good. It's that I don't think they have any faith. The Quantum Mania shook them up. They don't know what's going to work with people anymore. And so they're trying, you know, all these different sort of release strategies and different things. I didn't know what you guys kind of think about that feeling, that it kind of feels like there's a nervousness on their part about like what to do.
Yeah, I mean, it's 100% the point. Like, you're absolutely right. I think that the fact that, you know, even consistent with what you're describing is like the, you know, pushing back all the films, you know, this writer leaves that project. This, you know, the Kang Dynasty film has lost its writer and filmmaker. And, you know, all these things are moving around and changing and canceled or taken off the slate. Because, you know, and I'm glad at least they're doing something, because we talked about this a lot on that, like the Everything's Broken episode. It was like this idea that just, I genuinely believe that they've completely lost the buy-in and all of the good faith, like fandom that they had built up, you know, to the post Endgame, you know, even up to like No Way Home, you know, that they had used. You know, I feel like it just is, the simple reality is that they are really shaken right now, and they're like more resembling like the DCEU than the Marvel, you know, the MCU that we all, you know, what in some degree knew and loved. But I just feel like whether it was that trailer for Echo, or, you know, even the new trailer that they cut and released the week of the Marvel's release, that was really
thirsty,
really selling you on, you know, Endgame and Infinity War and the Avengers, and like trying to like really lure you back in. Yeah,
Steve, I know you said lure, but I like the idea that they were trying to lure you back in. You know what I mean? It's like, it really is like trying to connect you to the thing that you love, and
to the story that the stuff that worked.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is weird because I was shocked that I watched the finale before you guys, because I was so far behind, but I like plowed through it perfectly timed to watch that finale last week, and texted you guys both. Like, I was just like, I was blown away by it. Like, I completely, and I don't know if it's just because of the state of everything right now, you know, like I do genuinely believe, even as it sits, like it's definitely the top tier stuff for me in this phase or post Endgame stuff, you know, no question for me. I mean, up there, you know, I don't know what in conversation with things like No Way Home or you know, Guardians 3. I really liked the Werewolf by Night, you know, this stuff like that. But like I said, when I started watching this season, what differentiated it a lot for me was just like how much I've grown to love Loki as a character, and even Mobius in this series, but Loki over the course of where he started in the MCU and where he sits now, quite literally. I just feel like, you know, it's just that really is what kind of took me by, I don't know, not surprised, but like it just wowed me a bit. You know, I felt like the whole season was really good, and I thought the whole season was really good and consistently good, and in some periods great. But
I think some periods, first and last episode, incredible, top notch. Everything in between was really solid, and like you were saying, Ronald, a kind of more confident. Maybe I really liked the first season, but I do feel like this felt like they really knew what they were doing with the storytelling. But that those moments of greatness were were different from the other Marvel shows where you kind of are tempering your expectations and saying it's pretty good for television or something like that.
Yeah.
This really felt like cinema level storytelling at its best.
And I think what worked the most in those moments of greatness of the season, before you even got to how great the finale was just like that things just didn't work. Like things weren't going in anyone's favor the whole season, basically.
Yeah.
And I love that. I love that it wasn't like a, one step forward, two steps back thing. Like, I feel like from the jump in this season, there were so many things that he just, no one had control over. And the chaos of that, I think, really worked. And the desperation, especially getting in those last 2 episodes, Loki's desperation in like seeing what he had to do, but not being able to accomplish it. And like, that all worked for me so well. We mentioned it before. The score was incredible.
I think that was on a thread. We haven't mentioned that on the show. The music has always been good and very distinctive, but I feel like this season, it's almost like that's another thing where the confidence level, it just ramped up. They knew they have this unique sort of synth mixed with orchestral score, and it's weird and beautiful, and just really an interesting combination.
And like, it's like playing in my head. Like I can remember that final couple minutes, when, I don't know if we're gonna get into spoilers, but not to spoil anything, but the last few minutes of the episode of the finale, the sequence, just that score that swells, and when we see Loki in those final shots, that scene is in my brain and that music is in my brain, and like, I just loved everything about it, man. I went out on such a high, and whether we see more of Loki in the future or not, this is a huge achievement. I mean, I just like, kudos, man, because I loved it.
Well, here's the cool thing about that is that if they want to step away from Kang, I think after this they can. Like, I don't think they necessarily should. I think there's this also gives them plenty of opportunities to reset. This is a very recastable part, even though it seems at odds with the idea, because it's the multiple versions of the same guy.
Yeah.
But you could, at this point, you could totally have a different Kang show up. But if they wanted to stop, this plus Quantumania plus the end of Loki season 1 is enough of a showing for Kang, if that's what we want to do. The whole multiverse thing, I think they're still going there. I still think they probably have some fun stuff planned for us that I want to see. But if they wanted to cool on that, this show kind of tied that up in a strange way, and it ties up the character of Loki in a very mythic way, very comic booky way, but also it feels like it's right out of the mythology that this character comes from. So it just felt like my son, who's gotten very cynical and very it's mid about most Marvel stuff, said that what Loki did at the end of this series was one of the coolest things he's ever seen somebody do.
Yeah, honestly, it was awesome.
And I think
it was epic, dude.
I think a lot of what we're talking about, and we've talked about this before, but you cannot downplay just the star power of Tom Hiddleston in this role. It's one of the reasons why everything you said about loving this character works so well.
Yeah.
When he's afraid, the moment when they find Victor Timely at the World's Fair in the 1800s, the look on Tom Hiddleston's face is like one of pure fear, like mortal fear. And I feel like that feeling you're talking about, Steve, that's what the feeling that doesn't end until the season's up, of like, there's a threat, there's something happening. And here's a guy who kind of wants to think he's got the drop on the situation, but it's almost like what he's really learning about himself is that he does care, maybe not about everybody, but he cares about this group of 5 friends that he's made, and he wants to spend time with them. I thought that was such a neat hook for this character, to say it's not like he's become this super humanitarian, but he does have something he cares about. And that was a great way to ride out the kind of sci-fi techno jargon stuff that was going on that could, without the character stuff, wouldn't have really landed, I don't think. Ronald, what do you think about all this?
I've been very hyperbolic about how I feel about the MCU throughout our years as friends and very close friends and people that I love. But what I said still stands. I was very afraid once things got into the sky that it was going to be very hard, like magic and space and things like that. Once it got to the sky, it was going to get weird. And here's why. I never quite explained why, and I was trying to figure out why it bothered me so much. Do not ever compare your life to James Gunn. Don't do it. Don't try to make it seem like everything that follows space is going to have like a James Gunn level of quality. So people were saying, like, once we get into space, it's going to be amazing. Based on what? James Gunn's story?
Yeah.
That's what bothered me, because I knew that no one was going to be able to do the heavy lifting that he does. And by heavy lifting, I mean, mysticism, magic, and still having emotion in it. That is a
still very real.
Yeah, it's a real juggle, man.
It's grounded in the way that people interact with each other.
100%. And I've watched, this new genre of film, sci-fi, that came out a couple years ago. I happen to know that managing emotion and the sci-fi aspect of it can be a little weird. It's why a lot of them aren't good. It's why a lot of people aren't attached to them. So when I saw Loki season 1, I felt specks of it, right? I knew that the acting was good. You know that part. You know that Tom Hiddleston, Gugu is going to be good.
Owen Wilson, man.
Owen Wilson, obviously going to be amazing, but it didn't quite balance all that stuff as well as it should have, but it had some good things.
It was more herky-jerky. It was like episode to episode.
Oh, yeah. That's what it was. Absolutely. So when we got season 2, it kind of took all the things you love about these characters and up the ante, and then intensified the emotion of it, because it was a really grounded idea. What is a person who's kind of giving this divine sort of thing? He's kind of spoken this thing into existence. I'm a god. I do all these things. I'm amazing. I can fight. But what is your purpose? Why are you here? What is the point of you being here? Especially if you aren't moving the needle.
Yeah, what kind of god are you going to be? Which is a 100%. Cool line, because at the end of the story, he actually does sort of flip the paradigm as to what he's the god of.
100%. Right. And I think when you get to your purpose, you have to be your most vulnerable. And you could see a man breaking apart because he couldn't quite figure out how to solve this issue. And I like the way that it was done. And I like that. I mean, this is like some Wizard of Oz shit, where he kind of went to each person and got their consent in different timelines to kind of be like, how would you handle this? How would you deal with this? And, kind of got their blessing in obviously different timelines, but got enough of an idea what his closest friends thought about time and responsibility and purpose, that he knew what he had to do. And I think that some of it is kind of like, honestly, we saw the most elaborate, cool Wizard of Oz sort of thing that I'd ever seen, that was handled in a way that didn't feel like it was legitimately just taking beat for beat Wizard of Oz.
You know what it also reminded me of was, do you remember on Lost when Jack had to round everybody up to get him to go back to the island? Yeah. It was very much that kind of thing. But it's the same idea of like the stories about the connection. I mean, the Wizard of Oz is the story. We joke about, the friends we made along the way being the point of the story, but that's what the Wizard of Oz is. Yeah. That's what Lost really is too, to say these people are the ones who made this thing the way this happened because these people were together.
Yes.
This is a similar thing, and it's very touching. And I think one of the things you're hitting on there, Ronald, that I loved was how I would be surprised if we never see Loki again. I'd be fine if we don't, but I also think they created some really fun side characters that I heard the creator of the show say that when they were asking about another season, he said that they don't think the story's over, but he said if they consider the first 2 seasons of Loki to be their Breaking Bad, what they want to do now is their Better Call Saul. And I was like, with the TVA characters that we have, especially if we're going forward with Kang and multiverse stuff, to have the TVA as the kind of, these people are out there secretly trying to put the lid on that. That's kind of a fun thing to have that could totally come into some of these other movies we might see. Like I could totally see Owen Wilson, if Deadpool 3 is a multiverse story, I could see Mobius popping up for a scene. Like that's the kind of stuff that Marvel used to do that seemed fun. And I think they can maybe move towards that again if, and you alluded to this, Steve, they cleared the schedule next year. Deadpool 3 is the big thing. I mean, I think they're going to be, I think we got to watch that movie carefully, because they're putting everything they can into a property that they think can be that big buy-in project. I think Echo coming out might get some eyes. I think What If coming out might get some eyes, but we can look at next year and see that it's kind of the year of Deadpool for Marvel. And that could be, Ronald, to your point, whatever it is about Deadpool that people like, it is more gritty or grounded or something. It comes more from the gut and less fanciful, even if they've got, Wolverine hopping from a different dimension or whatever it's going to be.
Yeah, for sure.
So I mean, I think in that sense, you can see what direction they might try to push it. But this was like the kind of storytelling that we've been missing, honestly.
Because it's special.
It felt connected
It's
to
great.
everything that's come before. And it was kind of moving to think about this guy who we saw in the first Avengers movie, who's such a shit, to actually see him, even though he didn't go through the same character development that the other Loki who died went through. It was interesting to see he kind of ended up in a similar place of like growing. I don't know. It was a thoughtful, fun, interesting show.
Yeah, for sure.
So Ron, what did you think of the Marvels?
The Marvels, fun, silly. There may be some parts that may irritate your life out of your body, but that's okay. I mean, it was fun.
Your life will come back into your body.
It'll come back because that's how it works in the MCU. But it was fun.
Nobody stays dead.
Nobody stays dead. The chemistry between the three Marvel characters was so fun that you can't ignore how great this was. And I'm so pissed that they didn't emphasize some of the action scenes, because the ones that happened when they figure out how to make things work between them are insanity. Like,
they're switching. Listeners should know when the action scenes are fueled by this idea that their powers are entangled due to something that happens in the movie. And it actually was teased at the end of the Miss Marvel show. But whenever they use their powers at the same time, she Miss Marvel, Captain Marvel, and the unnamed Monica Rambeau, which doesn't have a superhero name, they all have powers based on the same kind of essential power of light. And so when they use their powers at the same time, they switch places. And the movie, you're right, Ronald, those action scenes get a lot of juice out of cleverly using that idea, an idea that could have been so chaotic it was just hard to even watch. But instead, they find some really fun and funny things to do with it. One of my favorite parts of the movie was the damn training sequence where they're jumping rope. I mean, you talk about chemistry and just kind of pure fun. That moment was so funny, and it's just them trying to figure out, okay, let's all, let's skip rope and jump in and switch places, and it's fun. It's fun. That you felt the Nia DaCosta at times like that is what I thought, because I think she's a creative, fun person, even though
for sure.
We hear different stories about how involved she was as this movie went along.
It was one of those movies that. So I have to say this while we're in the middle of this, because we didn't say it during Loki. Do not let the idea of rumors, hyperbole, secondhand information become fact for you, because sometimes the things
good or bad,
sometimes the things that you're hearing are just production things, and especially if you read the MCU book, you'll find that the thing that you are saying made the Marvels a terrible movie is the same thing that every MCU movie went through at some point. Do not get it messed up. It's always been a thing. Reshoots have always been a thing. New directors have always been a thing. New scriptwriters have always been a thing. So please relax on these hyperbolic talks about what makes something bad or good. It's too inside of baseball for me.
When post-production stretches on like it can for a Marvel movie as well, it's not that unusual for a director like Nia DaCosta to be prepping another project 100%. Because she's not in there on the VFX rooms finishing all that stuff. So the story about her not being involved in finishing the movie really is a much more normal Hollywood occurrence, especially for this kind of thing where, as important as the director might be, it's not a Nia DaCosta movie. It's a Marvel movie directed by Nia DaCosta.
Did you see her explanation?
I saw where she explained roughly what I just said. Did she say more than that?
Yeah, I mean, it was basically, essentially, she had signed on for a certain amount of time.
Right.
The MCU cycle, with you can read about it in that book. Basically, sometimes they just make changes constantly, and if somebody has an obligation to a studio, she told them this beforehand that she was obligated to. A cheaper budget that cannot move things around quite as easily. She made the choice to go to the other production, which she had promised that she'd do anyway. It's not like she just did it out of the blue. So the talks about that are a little more, shady and weird and not real.
Right. It's because people want to use it as a way to imply that she somehow didn't have her heart and soul in this movie. 100%. And I just think you'd be an idiot to think that someone like her would get a platform like a Marvel movie and wouldn't bring everything she could to it as a creative person, So
100%.
But we do know the Marvel machine. Also, you keep mentioning the book. If you read that book, you could see how it wouldn't be for everyone. A lot of directors might walk away from that saying, that's not how I want to do this.
One did. Big one did. And it's pretty much the heart of that entire book. The Edgar Wright sort of Ant-Man thing is a catalyst for kind of the culture that was cultivated post that production. The idea that like the studio wants to be more collaborative with the writer, with the director, so that you don't have a situation where Edgar Wright is publicly being like, this was a terrible experience. I don't know if I'll do it again. This was weird.
One last note I want to add about the Marvels, just because it's quote unquote underperformance as a sequel to Captain Marvel is making a lot of news. That movie made $1 billion.
$1 billion. Man.
This one is not going to make that. It's a different climate for superhero movies. It's a different climate for the movies in general. It's a different time for the MCU. I do think it's a shame if people sleep on this movie and use it as just the same way I felt bad that Quantumania caught all that flack for the effects being bad, when it's like Marvel practices are what you're seeing, you know, not so much this movie or the people that made this movie. And that movie becomes the discussion point for that. I think this movie becoming the discussion point for is the Marvel magic gone, is it's just bad timing for this movie.
Yeah, for sure.
But I also think it is, you mentioned the chemistry and the kind of charm of it. I mean, is it Iman Vellani? Is that how you pronounce her name? Yeah. She is, I mean, I didn't even love Miss Marvel as a show that much, but I liked her a lot, and she just pops off the screen in this thing. It is crazy. Teyonah Parris is really solid as Monica Rambeau as well. And I would say this movie, with the chemistry and the other two characters, one of the things it does that works well is it makes Brie Larson's kind of chilly, slightly awkward vibe actually a feature of the character. She's weird around people. She doesn't know how to act. For whatever reason, that's what Brie Larson seems like when she plays this character. She's not always that way, but in these movies she seems kind of stiff and awkward, and in this movie kind of makes it into a thing that her character is that person who doesn't really know, you know, how to, like, friendships are kind of a new thing for her. And I would almost say the one scene that really was a clunker for me in the movie, there's an awkward scene that tries to wrap up all the emotional stuff where they're standing out in a field, you know, the scene I'm talking about,
right. Yeah,
where it just feels like everybody just says the thing they need to say to move forward emotionally, rather than it being something that was particularly motivated. But outside of that, I think, you know, the worst crime this movie might commit is that it's kind of episodic and a little messy, but it's not like the effects are awful, and definitely it's full of the things you might like about a Marvel movie, you know, fun action and fun character moments, and a mid credits scene that actually might matter to some people and actually might get your juices flowing. And I would even say a sort of a cliffhanger at the end of the movie. One of the characters is off in a different situation at the end of the movie. That's just generally it's a kind of an intriguing Marvel thing to say, let's end a movie with a character where you really want to see what happens to them next. You know,
I'm going to add an addendum to what you said. If you don't like this end scene, you have no heart in your soul. You have no heart in your chest. You have no feelings. You have no emotions. You are dead in the world. This is a cool ass post-credit scene that opens up the world, that opens up some of the mythology that we've come to know. And I think that it's done in a cool, tasteful way. And if you are a fan of the past, the present, and the future, well, God damn it, your brain will go crazy.
And if you're a fan of pretty good CGI, you'll like that scene. It's pretty good. If you're a fan of CGI that looks like it's from the past. But anyway, so it's like, you know, we won't have anything Marvel to watch for a minute here, but you know, this was a nice reminder after the recent conversations about the wheels being off the wagon, that even if they don't have the mass culture buy-in, they can still entertain a couple of comic book nerds.
Go ahead,
Ronald.
Go ahead and see that movie. Yeah, man.
What else? Let's wrap this up. I can talk about Hunger Games, but I was going to see what else you guys had seen.
I haven't really watched a lot personally, man. I was supposed to come to that Hunger Games screening with you. That didn't happen.
I poured out a drink for you.
Thank you.
They got so mad.
Oh, yeah,
right on the road.
Yeah, I got a big gulp. I don't know why I got the big. I could have gotten like a small water cup or something, but
you know I go for the big gulp, John.
Yeah.
I just briefly. You definitely mentioned. Do you want to mention about Hunger Games first, and then if we want to throw in a couple quick things, just keep it brief.
I guess I'll just ask you guys temperature check. What are your feelings? I mean, how much does Hunger Games like loom for you like, does it loom large for you as a franchise or something you think about? Because I realized I saw the first two movies and did not see the second two movies, but I didn't like. I liked the second one well enough. I just didn't happen to watch the third and fourth movie. But I have nothing against it. What are your feelings on the franchise?
Love the books. Really enjoyed the movies. The first two are especially special to me, and then it gets a little muddy towards the end for some of the choices, but I really enjoyed the first two.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with the books, but the movies I really liked, especially Catching Fire. I think that the third and fourth one, from what I've gathered from fans of the books, and even just as my watching the films, I feel like that was one of those situations where like movies being chopped up into two parts really hurt it.
Yeah.
But even still, I enjoyed that. But I think Catching Fire is great. The second one is really good. But yeah, overall, I'm a pretty big fan, and I actually am looking forward to seeing this one. Like, I genuinely want to check this one out.
Well, I would think that then is the magic ingredient. I would think that the more well-versed you are in Hunger Games, the more the sort of prequel aspect of this will appeal to you.
Right.
I sort of knew the lead character is Coriolanus Snow, the Donald Sutherland character, many years later in the other films. So this is kind of a Phantom Menace of the Hunger Games, where you're taking like who's the worst guy in the other movies, and we're going to see kind of how he became that way. And I'm to understand that the book was long enough that they thought about splitting this book into two movies as well, but then instead just chopped a bunch of stuff out to make it work. But it still feels kind of like a book. It's got 3 distinct chapters, and I think at 2 hours and 40 minutes long, it only really feels long because when it gets to the end of the second chapter, it really does feel like the end of a movie. And then you look at your watch and there's a whole hour left at that point. It's not so much that it's so long, it's that it's the stop and start of a long movie. It's like if it's a long movie and it's just like Killers of the Flower Moon, which was very long, but like it's one consistent narrative. You don't feel like it's got these sections or chapters that kind of make you realize, oh wait, this is where a normal movie would be ending. But with that in mind, it's really well made. I think Francis Lawrence has been directing them since the first, right? Like that's kind of his franchise.
It was Gary Ross, and then Francis Lawrence,
and then right. So Gary Ross did one, kind of the way Christopher Columbus did, or Chris
Harry
Columbus.
Potter.
What do we call him? Is it Chris Columbus?
Chris Columbus.
Christopher Columbus is the historical asshole.
Yeah.
Chris Columbus, much nicer guy. But, it's like he set down the tone for the early Harry Potter movies in terms of doing one type of thing, and then someone else came in. Eventually it ended up as David Yates, I believe, who directed the most Harry Potter films. And he's the guy they brought back when they started doing the Fantastic Beasts movies. That he's the kind of style guy. I kind of feel like Francis Lawrence is the style guy for the Hunger Games in that way. That it's like, if you're going to do this, you're going to go back to that well. He's the guy who can shoot a Hunger Games movie. And there's something kind of dreary and drab about these movies, but there's also something I kind of respect about the downer vibe of it. Like it really is super downer. And this movie really is like, watch a guy who's sort of like, here's my thing. I wasn't well versed enough in the mythology to know whether like, are we even supposed to like him at the beginning? Like I didn't like him really at the beginning, but I don't know who I'm supposed to like in this world of like, because everybody seems to know about the Hunger Games and be okay with it. And it always seems to me like if you're one of the haves in the world of have versus have not of the Hunger Games, then you're just an asshole, right? Because you're benefiting from this, or you're entertained by this.
Sure.
You're not the one getting killed. Okay, so we start off with a bunch of characters that I don't think I would have ever liked, and then you see how one of them becomes way worse. But it's really done well, and again, the acting is good. Rachel Zegler's performance did not work for me. I didn't like her kind of corny Southern accent, and she sings a lot in this movie, and it was not my jam. The way that the singing was used, but again, I think if someone really loves her and loves her voice, I could see that being another thing that really takes off for them. But it's just the story of the rise of an asshole, and I think we see enough of that in life that maybe we can say when it's well done in a film. But I don't know how interested I was in that story just on its own face, given that I'm not like the guy who knows all the deets and catches all the Easter eggs of the Hunger Games world. But it's certainly well done. And I there were some super fans that were kind of coming out of the theater when I was leaving too, and they were totally spinning theories and stuff. So I don't know if this movie leads to a chapter where there's like a period where we don't know what happens between this and the Hunger Games. There are a couple of questions at the end or mysteries that I thought, all right, I wonder how much we're supposed to wonder. But either way, I guess this would be if you're a Hunger Games fan, this is an easy go ahead. If you're not, maybe this is a wait for it.
Okay, cool.
Yeah,
Cool.
that's
cool.
good, right?
Yeah, man.
Yeah, you give
I want to see it. I want to see it. Yeah, I like that. I like that. That gives a good sort of perspective on it because I'm interested, but I'm not interested at all. If that makes any sense.
Right. Who's that main dude in that? I don't know if I know him from anything, but he was really good.
In the new Hunger Games movie?
Yes. It's Tom Blythe.
He's from oh god, what's it? That show on HBO Max. Oh my god,
Euphoria.
what's it called? No, he might be in that. Is he in that?
No, maybe.
No. It's a period with Carrie Coon, the Gilded Age.
Oh, I've never watched.
I mean, like that's what I hear a lot. I know a lot of people associate him with that show. But I'm not sure what else he's been in, honestly.
Billy the Kid. Apparently, he played Billy the Kid in Billy the Kid.
Hey now.
And he was also in a bunch of stuff I don't really recognize the name of. Anyway, he's very good. And right up to the end, I would say that it's a shame that the sort of stop and start nature makes that last hour feel a little tacked on, because I really do think the last hour is maybe when the most interesting stuff happens in the movie. The middle part that is sort of a compressed Hunger Games movie where it's one of the Hunger Games is it might be the part that makes the movie feel a little long, but I think they wanted to get as much of that in there as possible because that's really the only action. The rest is very talky and very moody, and I don't know how faithful to the book it is, but my impression is I don't think there's another book out there to adapt. Correct me if I'm wrong, if anybody knows, but I don't think there's more than 5 books.
I don't think so.
Or more than 4 books even. So I don't know if this is an attempt to keep this franchise going, or if there's the implication that there's more to come. Have we heard anything about that? It seems like that's the ultimate property that would have been announced for like an HBO Max show or something, but I haven't heard anything.
Maybe it will. I mean, this is a huge property for Lionsgate, so hopefully they're estimating 50 to 60 million openings. So if it does that, I'd say maybe they'll get another one. So anything else you want to mention, Ronald, that you saw?
Hulu's Quiz Lady. See it. This was really funny. Great movie. That's all.
I want to see that. That's the
Jessica Yu movie with
Sandra
Awkwafina. Yeah. And
okay. Will Ferrell
and a battle rapper. What is his name? Spellbound. Not Spellbound. I feel like I say the wrong name. Dumbfounded. So Dumbfounded and Awkwafina used to be in a kind of Asian rap collective with a couple other rappers. Oh, cool. There's the documentary about it on Amazon from like damn near 15 years ago. She's been around for a really long time. So worth checking out. Really funny. Really cool.
The only thing I wanted to mention was I finally got around to watching the Lessons in Chemistry
How is
series on Apple TV Plus. I like it. It was interesting hearing you guys talk about the Marvels, because like I recently, for a while now, actually, I'm not sure how I feel about Brie Larson anymore.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
And I feel like this show is a roller coaster for her, because like she's definitely and I'm not familiar with the book that this show is based on, so the characterization of the character that she plays, it may be exactly as described in the book. She may be doing it perfectly. But as someone who has not read the book, there's a lot of the performance that just doesn't work for me in the show. I say that, but then like in the next episode, there's like she's really killer in it. So I don't know if it's like this trying to maintain this baseline version of this character, and it's just kind of elevating to certain levels that just don't work for me. But I don't know. It's like I was hoping to watch this and be like, yeah, okay, she's great. I'm convinced again. But I think I remain unconvinced. But I mean, the show is really interesting. It's a really cool, series on Apple TV. Again, we always say that, like, their production values are incredible. Their shows look great, so well made. Some great filmmakers directing the episodes of this series, and I think I think I'm halfway through it. I'm up to date on it, but it's the kind of thing where like, yeah, I'm in. I'm going to watch the rest of it, see how I feel about it. But it's a recommendation for sure. But it was more of a test for me to be like, see how I felt about Brie Larson again, because like she's been on this bubble for me where like I loved her for such a long time. And she's been in a couple of performances recently where I don't know, she's just not working still.
You know what's odd is that when I'm thinking about it, one of the movies that I started to see that in was Kong Skull Island, where she nor Tom Hiddleston managed to like break through the fog of like being in that movie. Like they were these two sort of bankable leads that just kind of disappear in a strange way. I think he comes out a little better than she does in that, but it's still that was an odd moment going into it, going, oh wow, I can't believe they got them, and then they kind of didn't make as much of an impression as some of the other character actors. So
yeah, check it out. So I mean, again, Apple TV Plus is, I feel like there's just the baseline bar for them is higher than most of the streamers in terms of quality. So yeah, I think that's really the only one I wanted to mention, because I've been checking that out. But otherwise, I think we're good, guys.
That's the show.
Let's get Ronald out of here. Schmovie.com is the website. You can go there. You can subscribe to the podcast. You can listen to it there if you just like to stay right on that webpage. Or you go to youtube.com/movie podcast if you want to watch the video, the visual element version option for the pod. We'll be back. I think next week we're going to do one of our what do we call those again?
Rewind, maybe?
I can't even remember.
Schmovie Rewind, Schmovie Rewind, maybe?
We just did one of these recently, and I can't even remember what the freak it's called. Schmovie Replay.
Oh, Schmovie Replay, yeah.
We're going to pull back something for the week of Thanksgiving, but the week after, we'll be back together. And again, my pick for required viewing for the episode in 2 weeks is I'll Take Your Dad.
Take Your Dad.
From 2018. Again, on Plex and Tubi. Until then, as always, you've made our day. Thanks.
Bye.
Oh no.
You ran out, man. You just made it.
I'll grab one from a previous episode where you said it really clearly, and I'll just drop it in if you don't mind.